What's up, guys? Welcome back to the MontyVerse. We just watched the new Game of Thrones spinoff, The House of the Dragon, Episode 1, and we have a panel here to break down and give our spoiler review on the episode. So let's get right into it, guys. Joining me today, I have a pretty interesting panel because we have a first-time MontyVerse guest here, but let's bring everyone on right away. So, joining me today, we have Zach McDonald, John Lestrina, and first-time MontyVerse guest Patrick Gibson. What's up, guys?
What up?
Hey.
Howdy.
All right, guys. So let's start talking about this right away because to give a little background of it, I'll give my experience and all of you guys can touch on this a little bit. I basically went into this blind, purposely blind. I didn't read any of the Fire and Blood series of books. I didn't rewatch Game of Thrones. I wanted to be as fresh and unexperienced with this material as possible watching this. So that's my perspective. John and Patrick, I believe both of you guys are pretty well versed in the source material, correct?
Indeed.
Yes.
Yeah,
I would say so, yes.
I've read through Fire and Blood a couple times. Not too recently, so I still need to flesh out a couple details, but
yeah, same with me. But yeah, I read it, enjoyed it. Read the Song of Ice and Fire core series and other ancillary stories, Dunk and Egg, Hales. But didn't reread or rewatch anything leading up to this.
Zach, what are you doing here?
I like the show, man. Good stuff. No, it's one of the few like fantasy or sci-fi book series that I haven't gotten to. I was kind of waiting for the whole thing to wrap up, and that was I think 14 years ago that I said that. So at some point I'll read it, but I haven't yet. I've watched Game of Thrones, the show, and I mean I'm excited to watch this show. But like you, I'm basically right where you are. I haven't rewatched Game of Thrones. I haven't read what's it called, Fire and Blood, that this is based on.
Mm-hmm.
I've not read that, so yeah, I went into it basically with no additional knowledge other than what I would have gotten from Game of Thrones.
All right, so we got two very well-versed people and two filthy casuals. So that's a great combo right there. But anyway, let's start off. Let's give our general thoughts on the episode. Basically, how do we think this episode did as the premiere of a series? And essentially, what did you think about it? What are some things that you liked? What are some things that you didn't? Pacing, score, acting? Let me know. Patrick, you want to start us off?
yeah, I think generally, I think I love all of the choices for the cast. I was initially very tepid on Matt Smith as Damon, and he fucking nailed it in this first episode. The character really is exactly as he's written, and the limited sort of understanding we have of the character. I think there was some interesting camera stuff. I quite like the first-person shooter type view in the Joust when we got to that. That was pretty dope. The score by Robin Djawadi is great as always. But I'll let anyone else touch on whatever they want to. Not try and take everything.
All right, John, you want to go next?
Yeah, I think I overall enjoyed it. I like how they started it, sort of prequel or prologue to it, setting it up, like how it got to the throne and everything, setting up this whole where we are in this story. I agree. I thought Damon Targaryen was really cool in this episode. All the shit he was doing, with the gold cloak, setting helps him up as like an outlaw kind of guy and a loose cannon. So I thought that was really cool. I was very surprised at how much I liked old Paddy as King Viserys. I mostly enjoyed him in the Cradle trilogy, like that, where he's very comical. So seeing more of a serious role was very interesting, really neat. And so I'm excited to see where this is going to go, where our setup was. I thought the pacing was nice. It was kind of like a slow burn, which I think you needed to get you into it. And I like to seeing King's Landing again. Those really cool visuals.
Yeah. Zach, what are your thoughts on the first episode?
I thought it was honestly a really great episode. The setup, sort of establishing sort of where we are, what the stakes are, kind of like what's in play, right? Because as somebody that doesn't know the story, so Patrick and John, they're both viewing it from the angle of sort of like, how did they execute the story? And I'm sort of seeing it like, what is the story that they're setting up, right? And to me, it was very intriguing. I felt like I had a really good sense of sort of what the equations are and sort of what we're trying to solve for at the end of this. And I just want to say, like, people that are fans of the MontyVerse that have seen me on here before, they know that I like to shit on Star Wars TV shows and MCU TV shows. And I gotta say, it's just good to have like a high quality TV show to watch again, because I'm getting kind of tired of the MCU and Star Wars TV shows. The quality of this just sort of stands above those as far as I'm concerned, and that's fun, and I like that. So excited for that, just in general.
Yeah, I think for me, in the beginning, towards the beginning of the episode, I was having a little trouble getting sucked back into this world. But I definitely think as the stakes got higher and things started ramping up, and the intrigue and kind of this line of succession and the politicking and kind of really all the things started to roll into motion. That's when I really started getting into the episode, and I found myself being drawn into this kind of Game of Thrones political stakes of it all. But I do agree. I don't like Matt Smith in much. I just think he picked some of the worst roles when in terms of his career. But I did really enjoy him in this. And the only really, at the end of the day, I really did enjoy the episode. But the only really complaint I have is that I think some of the CGI on the dragons was a little rough, and I think that's because we do have to see fully grown dragons way more times in this series than we would have to in the original series in Game of Thrones, where we didn't see them too often, so they could kind of save their budgets for those big moments. But besides that, I think this was a really good start to the series so far, and I'm excited to see where it goes next. But now that we have our general thoughts, we can really kind of get into the details of it, really the nitty-gritty of everything. And let's start with kind of our main lead into the series, which is King Viserys Targaryen, who's essentially our gateway into the show and learning about how he came to be and his lineage. So, Patrick and John, do you guys want to kind of talk about King Viserys a little bit and why he's so important to the story?
Yeah, I'll hop in here. As it's set up in the beginning, both he and his cousin, Princess Rhaenyra, who is the wife of Corlys Velaryon, the master of ships on the High Council, are both grandchildren of the previous king, Jaehaerys the First. Jaehaerys the First, in the mythos of Westeros, the Targaryen dynasty, and Game of Thrones, is the greatest king ever. Reigns for 60 long years. So whomever follows him is certainly going to have a lot to live up to. And I think we see that a little bit. One of the really important little touches that we see early in there is when the maesters are tending to his wound on his back. And he specifically mentions that it was as a result of being cut by the Iron Throne, which is a reference to a sort of common thread that is used when referring to those that sit the Iron Throne. It fights back against those it thinks aren't worthy.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but we do see that later. We do see the throne cut him again, correct?
Yes. And to a quick sidebar, I quite like how they've set up the Iron Throne as opposed to in Game of Thrones, where it's very small and you have the expansion down the stairs, which is much more reminiscent of the actual Iron Throne as described in the books. I thought that was a really, really wonderful touch. But yeah, that's sort of where we are at the beginning with Viserys, where he's struggling, and he will always sort of be struggling to live up to his grandfather's name.
Sorry, John.
I was going to say he's kind of as like in the same position as his grandfather, where he has to kind of just choose an heir or figure out an heir, where because Viserys was chosen by a council because Jaehaerys's ex-heir, Balon, I think it was, died before he did, so they need to choose Viserys. So he's kind of in this similar situation of like, what's he kind of do? Which you can see he's trying to have a kid, hoping it's a son, and all that didn't go well. So now he's got to, again, go back to the old drawing board to figure out what's he going to do, because he's getting a little older. And you never know when you're going to go.
Patrick and John, I want to ask you guys a question, because I did see this comment that we got from one of our Facebook watchers. and they said that they got bored watching it because they already read the books and they know what's going to happen, and that it was very underwhelming. And they were hoping for a different vibe from Game of Thrones, and the soundtrack was very similar. Did you guys, having read the books, did you guys find yourselves being bored with this episode, or do you think that there was enough there to kind of get people who read the books interested in the episode?
I think I think that's one of the things about this that's interesting is because I think the payoff for a lot of the book readers is going to be seeing things that we've been described fully fleshed out. And in an episode where it's very much setting the stage for what's to come, we're not going to get that same sort of satisfaction. And I completely understand that perspective. I'm still very intrigued because I think the biggest strength of the early seasons of Game of Thrones is the interplay between the characters. And given that we aren't given that in the books, I'm still pretty fully invested in what's happening going forward.
That's fair. Zach, I know that I jumped in before you got a chance to talk about King Viserys. What are your thoughts on the character? As someone who kind of jumped into the show fresh, you kind of see this guy, you kind of hear the backstory of what came before him and kind of where he is now. So what were your thoughts?
I will say just right off the bat, it was interesting to hear Patrick talk about how he's kind of living in the shadows of who did he succeed? What was his name? Jaehaerys. Sorry. Because I'm not sure that came through, that he was sort of living in his shadow. It seemed like he was kind of doing his own thing. But also I thought they played the character kind of interesting because he feels like he's a good man. He's noble. But then they juxtapose that with sort of his anything for an heir, a true son heir, just to do anything to avoid one, either naming his cousin who's a psycho or naming his daughter who is a girl. And it seems like it's like he's a little bit of a shitbag because of that, but it's like, I don't know. It's also, you're judging them based on sort of the world that they live in. But I mean, me being from this world, I still can say he's a shitbag for kind of like choosing to sacrifice his wife. No guarantee she was going to survive anyway, but I thought that was interesting to sort of play it out that way after essentially everything up to that point had been like, hey, look at how good this dude is. Like, he's really got it together. He cares about people. He's got a bit of a soft spot for his brother. Sorry, I think I said his cousin earlier. His brother. He's got a soft spot for his brother that is maybe not ideal, but other than that, he just seems like a good dude that just cares about people. So then to see him get so sort of like laser focused on an heir to sort of the detriment of the people around him was, I think, a good way to sort of build his character.
Yeah, not only choosing to end the life of his wife in favor of potentially getting a male heir, but the way that he chose, that they had to do it, like the brutality of that essentially a C-section,
right?
A medieval C-section was so brutal to see, and it was so gut wrenching to watch, and it definitely gave you a visceral reaction. I don't know if this is of any relevance because, like I said, I did not read the books, but someone that is a good. I don't know if that's a good theory or not. I don't know if that's a spoiler or if it's just a good theory.
I don't think meningitis is ever explicitly mentioned in Fire and Blood, but
I don't
who
think
knows?
so. I don't
They'd probably call it something else.
Yes,
They'd call it like oysteritis or something.
Hold on, let me text George and see if he can give me an answer.
Yeah, could you get old George R.R. up on here, see if he could write something new at any time soon? But yeah, that's old King Viserys Targaryen. Let's talk about Doctor Who himself. Let's talk about Matt Smith. Let's talk about Prince Damon Targaryen. And we were mentioning brutality and sheer like grotesqueness. Some of the stuff that he did in this episode was downright gnarly. Like it was just brutal for the sake of and gorish for the sake of being gorish. But let's talk about the importance of Damon Targaryen in terms of not only this episode, but in the story going forward. And what are your guys' thoughts? What do you think he's going to do going forward? And what did you think about him in this episode, this first episode?
I will say, Pat, you said that the one negative thing about the episode was the CGI. I think the one negative thing about the episode was sort of that over-the-top gorishness.
Yeah.
That was something I was hoping we were going to get away from in this series versus the Game of Thrones series. It's kind of my least favorite part of Game of Thrones, and thus far it is my least favorite part of this show. I think there's plenty of story to tell there without resorting to that. I don't know. That's maybe personal opinion that other people don't agree with, but otherwise, regarding the character, I don't know. I think they played him kind of just enough, sort of psychotic without being like completely unhinged. Like he's not quite a comic book character like a supervillain or something. He still feels like somebody that has real motivations and sort of truly lives in the same realm as the rest of them. As far as what he's going to do, it's an interesting setup because it seemed like he had a good relationship with what's her name, Rhaenyra. But now she is the heir to the throne that he clearly wants. So I'm curious to see how sort of that relationship is explored moving forward.
Well, I think that to address this stranger Nikki's concerns with the episode, I think the solution there would probably just to be, get a stronger stomach.
Yeah.
Yeah, get good.
Get good.
But anyway, Patrick and John, tell us kind of a little bit, because I agree with Zach. I think that some of the violence in this episode was it wasn't like early Game of Thrones, but it was definitely gratuitous for the sake of being gratuitous and being shocking, and I think it was a little unnecessary. But besides that, I like the character of Damon overall. I think that he's very interesting. I think that he definitely stood out compared to the rest of the characters that we meet this episode, and that gives him a very strong presence, basically based off of everyone else's. So I'm sure you guys know very well that this is the importance of this character. So why don't you guys talk a little bit about Damon Targaryen?
John, I'll let you go because I sort of jumped on.
He's the younger brother of the king. So he's kind of you can see he's kind of seems like a drifter. He goes off, does his own thing. He can't hold down a job. His brother just wants to give him a job, but he kind of floating around, and this whole joust is what kind of draws him back. They figure, oh yeah, Damon's gonna show back up, and because he's a very skilled warrior, he's very renowned in the time for being maybe almost kind of like how Jaime Lannister was like, the hot shot swordsman. That's kind of like what Damon of this era would be. And again, very much a womanizer, which is what you could see. I mean, he was getting a little busy and enjoyed his drink. But I thought he came off really cool. Cool as in, just a badass, but not necessarily a good person, which is a whole different kind of thing. But I think his introduction was cool. He looked cool. Looked visually looking of how like art you see done. Like I mean that's almost picture perfect of what he appeared to be. So I really like him visually. I think he could have done with a little bit more. Maybe Matt Smith maybe put a little more work in the gym to get a little more cut. I mean, because you think, oh, you're gonna be in that scene, like, dude, like, where's the abs?
I'll send them a text.
I thought that was a little bit of a letdown. I was like, oh, abs. See, what's he working with? And unfortunately, a little disappointing.
A little disappointed.
I will say, when he was wearing the armor, he was looking pretty diesel, and I was thinking to myself, dang, Matt Smith put in the work. And then we cut to that sex scene, and I was like,
oh man, like, what are you doing, dude? Yeah.
I was like, you should have taken some notes from Ben Swallow, but I guess not.
Take Damon Targaryen. I want to bring on a really big fan of Matt Smith, the actor. He has told me multiple times that Matt Smith might be one of his top 5 favorite actors of all time. And joining us now is from Real Entertainment, Mr. Matt Thomas. Hey, Matt. Hey, dude.
Hey, Matt.
You're a fucking liar.
What are you talking about? You love Matt Smith. You tell me all the time.
I despise that man with a passion, and he nearly pulled me out of this show is so fucking bad.
Okay, but besides that, how do you feel about Damon Targaryen, the character? I think his rage for Matt Smith crashed his
All right.
computer. So, Patrick, what do you think
Okay.
about Damon Targaryen, the
Awkward.
character, not Matt Smith, the actor?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's the classic sort of
Full
badass
Metal.
that's being set up as not really an anti-hero, but like, hey, this is the character all the cool, edgy people are gonna really dig. Like, but in a way more violent way than like Tyrion Lannister ever was. I think to me, what the best summation of what this character is supposed to be and how we're supposed to think of them is one of the comment that was made. I can't remember by which member of the council, but when they're discussing initially that the topic of succession and Damon's overhearing them from sort of the hidden room, someone made a comment of, "Oh, this is just another Maegor." Again, history lesson. Maegor the Cruel was a previous king, son of, correct me if I'm wrong on this, John, son of Aegon the First.
I think so. Yeah, he was
Yeah.
really. Yeah, he didn't last long.
No, second son. I believe he was the second son of Aegon the First, but he was like legitimately insane. And if you think that the things that Damon has done in this episode, ramp it up by like 15 times, and that's what Maegor the Cruel was. And so that purposeful juxtaposition to sort of set up how we are supposed to be seeing this character initially, at least from the perspective of others who are trying to undermine him, is very purposeful, and I think a very good way of setting the scene of like, okay, these are the directions that people are going to be going in going forward.
One thing that really struck me about the character of Damon is his armor is so unique. It definitely strikes a very interesting silhouette. Is there any relevance to his armor? And I know his sword has a name. I don't remember it. But
Dark Sister.
Yeah.
Dark Sister, I believe, is his sword, because you have that scene with him and Rhaenyra where he gives her the Valyrian steel sort of necklace.
So I was, out of curiosity, I just want to ask you guys, is there any relevance to the armor or to the sword at all? Because I know in Game of Thrones, some of the swords, there was a lot of relevance. There was a lot of backstory to them. So I was just curious, since he has a named sword, I was wondering if there's anything important that would be interesting to know without spoiling anything that it does in the future.
Yeah. So his sword is a Valyrian steel. So think Ned Stark's ice, long claw. So yeah, it's it's very like some of the best swords. It's one of the two. Wait, there's the other one is Blackfire. No,
Blackfire, yes.
Blackfire, yeah, is the other Targaryen, because I think there was. Well, there's multiple, but there's multiple Valyrian steel swords because they're very obviously very rare. So they're sort of kind of hard to come by. So it's like one of the, and for him having that sword, it's being the best swordsman, best warrior, is very important that he can wield it and hold it.
Yeah. Okay. Speaking of war,
as opposed to the King Viserys having it.
Yeah.
And again, a little bit. Again, I'm going to keep pumping in with the history.
No,
lessons,
go for it, please.
So, as John mentioned, there are two Valyrian steel swords, Blackfire and this Dark Sister. Dark Sister was the sword of Queen Visenya, one of Aegon the First's sister wives, and Blackfire was the sword of Aegon the First, and sort of has a tumultuous history in the world of in this world up until this point, because bestowing Blackfire was traditionally seen as naming an heir, but Aegon kind of didn't do that. He gave Blackfire to Maegor and then named his older brother the heir, and it just made everyone kind of, and that's sort of the story of what we're going through right now, right? So yeah, Dark Sister is sort of the second sword of the House Targaryen, and it's kind of fitting that Damon has it right now.
Yeah, and Patrick, you were telling me a little bit before, but Damon also has the dragon of
I believe it's Visenya. Yes, let me just. I'm going to fact check this because
Okay, no
want
problem.
to make sure.
While you
there
do
are
that,
too many dragons.
what I do want to bring up is the joust, because we did say how great of a warrior Damon was. One, I thought it was really cool to kind of get a joust in the first episode. It definitely added to the action of it, and it kind of told the story in the sense of where the other warriors from the different houses are at. Like you kind of have Rhaenyra, I think that's how you pronounce her name. Correct me if I'm wrong. The queen that never was. Rhaenys. She kind of says like, oh, these guys haven't seen war in over 60 years. They're soft, they're just like kids throwing dirt at each other, like whatever. And I really like that. But also we're introduced to a character called Sir Kristin Cole, which is quite possibly the easiest name in Game of Thrones to remember. so I definitely, it's very interesting because I feel like there's more to come from this character. They kind of definitely put a spotlight on him, so I'm really curious to see. But what did you guys think of kind of like the action of this episode in general, and kind of how the action they used to tell stories? Because everything from essentially the raid of King's Landing by the Royal Guard or whatever they were called, to the joust, it all kind of, the action kind of inferred a story a little bit. So if you guys want to touch on any of that at all, I'll go ahead, Patrick.
I'll quickly jump in. Caraxes was not. Vhagar is Viserys, and Vhagar will play a role in this story going forward. Caraxes was the dragon of one of Jaehaerys' sons who passed away, or was killed, I should say.
Gotcha.
And then Damon took it.
All right.
Got it.
Good to know.
As far as Kristin Cole and the whole jousting scene went, I thought his interaction with Damon was pretty good, as far as more so what it meant for Damon than it did for Kristin Cole. I mean, basically what we get from him is he's just some like mystery man that is apparently really good at fighting. So I'm assuming he's going to play a role at some point and have a story to tell here. But when he kind of punks Damon repeatedly, and we've already seen in this jousting, like you mentioned, like, these people haven't seen war. They've got all these pent up frustrations. It's so shocking they didn't just start killing each other at first blood or whatever. But then they kind of are just all killing each other, which I thought was weird. Like, somebody should step in and tell these guys, stop killing each other. But they don't. They just let it keep going. But one, Kristin Cole obviously doesn't kill Damon because that'd probably be bad for him. So it made sense. But also, Damon shows some restraint by not like taking some one last cheap shot to kill him, which is what I 100% expected to happen the entire time. And I thought that was weird. It was it was a little bit of a curveball with regards to Damon's character, because he yields, he kind of admits defeat. He, it kind of smirks like, you little piece of shit, I'm gonna get you for this or something. But he doesn't sort of like exact his revenge immediately or call his guards or something like I would have expected like King Joffrey to do or some shit like that. So it was just a weird curveball, I thought. And to me, like, yeah, his character didn't do a ton other than that, but I thought he played a role in Damon's arc already, which was interesting.
Yeah, and you kind of and like you said, I also was expecting Damon to kind of like take his dagger or something and just get one kind of final cheap shot in there. And the fact that he didn't, and kind of the fact that when he talks to his brother, the king, at the end, it's almost with this true sincerity, like that he actually wants to help and he actually wants what's best for his brother. That at least has me curious, is Damon really as, bad as everyone says he is, or is he really as kind of reckless as everyone says he is? Well, he does have this reckless streak. Does he really have good intentions at the end of the day? So that really had me curious. If there is some sort of swerve in there coming for the future. And yeah, I'm not sure if kids will be ready for this version of it. The other one is pretty scarring. The original Miracle, but it's pretty scarring to see as a child. Anyway, but yeah.
One more thing, actually, I want to get your guys' thoughts on this.
Yeah.
Where do you see it developing when he goes up and he specifically asks? Because these three moments are pretty important, right? Where there are three different knights who come to ask for the blessing of three different ladies of court. You have the guy who I don't remember his name.
I don't remember.
Yeah.
He was a Targaryen, a Baratheon,
a
right?
Baratheon.
Yeah, one of the Baratheons, I believe, right?
Yeah, there was two Baratheons. They both got wrecked by Cole.
Yeah. But the first one comes up and asks for the blessing of the queen who never was, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Damon comes up, asks for the blessing of Alicent Hightower. And then Cole comes up, asks for the blessing of Rhaenyra. So I'm just wondering what you guys think of that. Where do you think that sort of is going to develop, and what do you think that's for going forward?
I mean, my assumption immediately was that the Rhaenyra was probably gonna marry Cole, Alicent was gonna marry the other dude, and the Baratheon guy was gonna need some like either financial help or backing or something of somebody with nobility or money or influence or power, and that would come.
Well, yeah, or isn't the
queen that never
implication
was,
there
I
that
mean.
kind of maybe the Baratheons feel like the wrong king took the throne, like during the split? Like that's what I got from it anyway. He's like, "Oh, let the tongues wag; it won't change the line of succession." You know, that's kind of what I took away from it. And I agree with Zach. I did assume that it was just factions forming and parties lining up, and I thought that was pretty. For Game of Thrones, that was pretty like straightforward. Like probably the most straightforward kind of foreshadowing in the episode, as when it comes to a lot of the other things that happen.
I would say Damon asking for Allison's favor was a shot at old Otto Hightower, because they don't like each other. So, and you can see Otto's reaction was like, "Come on, like not happy." So I saw as, "Oh, that's a shot."
Yeah, I thought that was
shot.
definitely a case of Damon kind of pushing his buttons. I think that was also pretty clear. But again, I think the way that these shows have been kind of set up historically, it's felt kind of like a linear kind of path here, where that'll probably have a direct impact on sort of what the players are
And
in
I think
episodes to come.
We kind of saw what that did to Otto towards the end of the episode, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Can we talk about that for a second? Because that creeped me out
Otto
so much. Let's talk about Otto. Because I feel like we're gonna have to. I mean, played by Rhys Ifans. Took me a while to kind of realize that, because I knew that he was in the show, but I didn't know who he was playing. And I was like, oh, that's him behind all that beard, like so. I did like the character, and I did like his portrayal of the character. And I kind of do like he was like the very logical, very methodical one. And then as soon as Damon kept pushing and pushing and pushing, we kind of saw what that did to him. And then we get this big reversal revealed at the end that he's kind of a scumbag.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a similar reveal that we get to the king, where you're like, oh, he's a good guy, but it's kind of from a different angle, right? Like Viserys, it's kind of like he's honorable and loyal and cares about his family and things like that. Whereas with Otto, it's more like, no, he's very much like a pragmatist. He's like you said, logical. He's like, look, these are the things we should be doing. This is what makes sense. So you sort of view him as sort of like a positive figure in the council there. But then, yeah, he hits you with that swerve where he's like, hey, the king is grieving. Go smash. And you're like, what the fuck?
Yeah, because he's the hand of the king, which is basically, with the king's not around, he is the guy that's running the show. He's like he is the advisor. He is basically number two and basically number one at the same time. So he's got his sort of the realm and the king all at once. He's gonna make tough decisions, but also too, as we know from Cersei and Littlefinger, it's all a game. So he is, at that moment, he is playing the game. He's making moves where he feels the realm needs to go, and he's not liking where things are going, particularly with Damon and possibly other things. So he's got to make the move for what he feels is the best for the realm, and really probably for his position and his family.
I mean, is the goal for him to like get a new heir through Alicent, or what? That's kind of what I was wondering.
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah, if they get together and produce a son that is a stronger a stronger case.
Yeah, and we talked about the gratuitous violence in this episode, but I think that's one of the moments that had me cringing the most, especially when he like looks and he's like, as she's walking away, he's like, "Put on one of your mother's dresses," and I was just like, "Ugh!" Like I just go. Ugh.
Well, I mean, the whole time because she's like, in his chambers, and you're like, "Oh no," he's like, "Yeah." And,
Yeah.
To be
I,
fair,
trust me, you get it.
Targaryens
Don't pretend like you
marry
don't get
all
it,
the
you get it.
time. There's sisters and brothers marrying and cousins.
like
and
at the very least, at
daughters
least this
and
isn't incest.
Yeah.
Because
That's true.
it's the Targaryens. You never really know.
right, it's just a dad pimping out his daughter.
Yeah.
Because going back to Game of Thrones, Daenerys probably would have married Viserys.
Yeah.
I can't remember how old Alicent is technically at that point, and I kind of don't want to look at it. It's not very old.
Just by the way the episode paints it, it feels like she's very young. So yeah, that was definitely probably one of the most cringe-inducing moments of the episode. But speaking, that was a terrible transition. I was like, speaking of young women, let's talk about.
Actually, to jump in, just for your perspective for how old Rhaenyra is supposed to be, when her mother dies in childbirth, 8. She would have been 8 years old.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, in the opening sequence, we see that she is pregnant. I assume that is with Rhaenyra, and then it says, like, 7 years have passed since the king died, which I assume was pretty quickly after that. So, yeah, my thought was probably in the kind of like similar with Game of Thrones. In the books, they're probably much younger, but in the show, they're probably trying to make them read as, like, 14 or 15 or something like that. Is kind of what I thought.
I looked this up. The actresses playing the respective Alicent and Rhaenyra, 19 and 22, like you said, probably playing early mid-teenagers, when in reality in the books they're like children.
Right.
It's
So Alicent, I'm looking up Alicent. She would have been hold on, let me 105 about 17, 18.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
so
okay.
Okay. So
Okay, not bad. Not as bad.
Not as horrific.
not as horrific.
I mean, not ideal, but you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, actually,
not great.
Saying that the aging up of Rhaenyra to sort of match her is an interesting choice. There's also like, because two women can't just be friends, right? You have that like interesting little there's a couple interesting little back and forths between them at the beginning that are like the sort of leftovers from the book, where it's like, oh, maybe they were more than friends because reasons. They spent a lot of time together.
Which is weird that you say that, because that scene with them studying together, it was a very intimate scene, like with Rhaenyra's head on in Alicent's lap, and they were talking very gentle towards each other. I thought, is the implication here? Oh, is that the faction that forms? Is that how she? Because the whole time I'm watching this, I'm like, okay, so where's the Civil War going to come from? Like, how is this going to erupt into essentially a Targaryen Civil War? And I'm seeing that, and I'm like, oh, is that why? Because she kind of like finds her power and is independent. And so I'm glad you brought that up, because I did get some of that implication there that they were more than friends. So I didn't know if that was intentional or if that was just part of the direction of the episode. If that was something. So you're saying that they allude to possibly maybe happening in the book?
Yeah, I think early, and again, it's been a while since I've read it, and they do this a lot with sort of and this is a sort of a common thread in how the book is written, because it's taking the perspective of a maester relying on sort of sources from that era. There's going to be an implicit bias to try and discredit potential female heirs. So I think they're playing that up a little bit just to try and make it so that there is an element of intrigue and confusion for the first time viewer. It's like, okay, maybe I don't know exactly how these factions are going to form, because there were some pretty straightforward moments, but there were also some moments that were like, oh, this kind of contradicts how these things look like they were going to develop.
All right, fair enough. But I think overall that's probably the last main character that we really haven't broken down, and that, of course, is Princess Rhaenyra Targaryen, who we find out at the end of this episode is the chosen heir to the Iron Throne. I really liked her introduction. I kind of really liked how she was a little rebellious. She was a little like, oh man, I want to do what the men do. Why am I put in this box? Why am I forced to birth children in the future? Like whatever. She's kind of wrestling with that weight of her responsibilities, but she's also, like a dutiful daughter and a dutiful princess. So I really like how it's not just kind of a generic caricature of, I want to be like everyone else. I want to be the strong one, and how she's thrust into this situation. I'm really excited to see how she handles all of this going forward. But what were your guys' thoughts?
I felt like she was the best character of the episode. I think she is she the main character? It feels like she's the main character of the show.
Given she was narrating at the beginning, I think,
right, that's
at least for now, she's the sort of main character we're supposed to.
Right. Okay. So it feels like the focus is on more so her path than anyone else's, and it's going to be kind of how Damon and people around him probably affect her path. But kind of the things that you said, her being sort of living in this world where she is both dutiful but also kind of a bit more of her own thing. She's a bit more adventurous. She likes going out and flying on the dragon. She wants to bring Alicent with her. The things we talked about, the relationships that she's formed, and just like right off the jump to her, she says her aunt, I don't remember what her name was, basically couldn't sit on the Iron Throne because she's a woman, and you can tell that kind of like bothers her even when she's that young. And then also we see it at the funeral, like I hope my father had a couple hours of happiness or something like that while his new heir was alive. So clearly that kind of weighs on her, like the idea of being passed over and over again for no reason other than her gender, right? Like she can do anything that they do. And I don't know if she just felt like a strong go-getter, I was vibing with it.
Strong vibes. Did we also see a bit of, I don't know if it was intended to be like bitterness that Rhaenys kind of has towards Rhaenyra when she is appointed the next in line to the Iron Throne. I don't know if that's pride she's looking at her with, or more of like a little jealousy and a little bitterness. So I'm really curious to see where that goes.
Well, I mean, she's known as the queen who never was. That's like her.
And now you have
poke at anybody, kind of thing. Yeah.
Because it's like she wasn't allowed to do this because she was a woman, basically, because they kind of voted for the man. But now all of a sudden the precedence is changing, and she's a little bitter by it. She's like, that could have been me. That should have been me.
Yeah, I could see from her perspective seeing it either way, because you could look at it and be like, okay, this is bullshit. So now all of a sudden it's okay for a woman to sit on the Iron Throne, but 8 years ago or whatever it is, 15 years ago, it was forbidden or something. But then you could also look at it from the perspective of saying, okay, it's pretty fucked up that I didn't get to be put on the Iron Throne, but at least the person who they did choose to put on the Iron Throne didn't have the same mentality that the people that put him on the Iron Throne did. And he is more reasonable in saying, no, the person most qualified, even though that we know from seeing his own actions, he actually really didn't want to put Rhaenyra on the Iron Throne. This was sort of like a Band-Aid solution for him. He had all sorts of other plans, and this is kind of just like, well, shit, nothing else worked. I guess I'll put her on the Iron Throne. But either way, from Rhaenys's perspective, she's probably seeing it potentially as like, okay, at least now we sort of made this breakthrough, and the choice between me and him wasn't all bad. We probably both would have been good choices, and seeing this come to fruition kind of proves that out.
Yeah. And joining us again, Matt Smith superfan, Matt Thomas. Welcome back.
That's back just for you, Pat. That's just for
Welcome
you.
Welcome back to the show. Morbius in your top 5 of the year, you told me.
Top
like-
5 worst movies, yes.
of the year. How do you feel about Rhaenyra Targaryen?
So I thought that was really interesting to see, like Zach brought up, kind of the bitterness she has. But overall, I like where her character's going. And granted, I am trying to like keep an open mind because I'm going to watch episodes 2 through 6 tomorrow. So I'm just trying to keep things low key right now. So I'm more here to bitch about Matt Smith and listen to you amazing people.
All right. Patrick, John, talk to us, sweaty, about Rhaenyra Targaryen. How significant of a character is she to this story? What did you guys think about the way she was portrayed in this episode? And just give us your general thoughts.
Well, without getting into too far, she's very central to the whole story.
Hmm.
So I think definitely at the start of the episode, showing her young, I think we're supposed to get major Daenerys vibes visually. I remember just seeing just images of people side by side with Emilia Clarke and young Rhaenyra actress, I don't remember her name, side by side, visually looking the same. Obviously, Targaryen blonde, that whole look, but I think you're supposed to get that whole Daenerys vibe.
Millie Alcott's the name for you, John.
Oh, thank you, Matt. But no, I think she was very well portrayed in this episode. Very young, obviously very young at this point. Getting to this point of being possibly now the heir to the Iron Throne, being a very big step, I think is very cool for a character. And also interactions with Damon were very warm.
Yeah, there's definitely a closeness there that we observe. You know, is that are they two very close characters? They have sort of an existing familial. Are they very close in terms of like familial bond? Do they have a strong familial bond with each other?
Be a niece, right? Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, like, are they on
You
good?
mean,
Like, obviously,
like-
it seems like
Yeah.
they were like.
I think it's something. I think a lot of the family stuff isn't explored too much
Mhm.
in the book. I think it's a good idea though to have her sort of maybe be a slight bit more attached to Damon, to give him a reason to be around court because like he's sort of gallivanting, right? And
Mhm.
like Zach mentioned earlier, he's had, or was it John? I can't remember. He's had like 17 different jobs because they can't find some like one place to put him in. And so to have something to tie him to King's Landing is pretty important. I think my thing with Rhaenyra is going forward. How are they going to manage the time lapse and the transition? Because we know that Olivia Cooke is set to play an older Alicent Hightower, and that Emma Darcy is set to play an older Princess Rhaenyra. And so it's just that's sort of my biggest intrigue going forward. When is the time skip going to happen? If it's going to be a time skip, or if it might be just like a gradual thing, and sort of what is going to be the catalyst that sets that off and transitions us more closely to a future, and if that's sort of where the conflict is going to start to arise.
It's interesting you mentioned that because I knew like one of the only things I knew about this show was that there was a time jump because I knew there were two different actresses playing those two specific characters. After watching this episode, I kind of just assumed the time jump was going to happen immediately at episode 2 because I thought this was sort of like setting the foundation of sort of kind of where these things are going to sort of go in different directions a little bit, and then we're going to rejoin.
It's episode 2 or 3. I remember my dad telling me about it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean that was the sense I got from it was like, okay, we've sort of established, you know, what the factions are, at least to some degree, or we've at a bare minimum, we've established who the two primary parties are between Rhaenyra and Damon, and we've established a handful of people around them, and we can probably just pick up 5 years down the road or something like that, and sort of see where they have gone from here and sort of how those have evolved. And then the story truly sort of plays out from there was kind of what I was expecting. But
That makes sense.
I don't know.
It's actually super interesting. I didn't even know there was a time skip.
Yeah.
No, because we have like 25 years left to play with. From
Oh,
when the
wow.
events-
Over
Okay. I did not know
yeah.
that.
The total length of this show, given where we are now, is about 25 years, and I figure
Time jump
Yeah.
every few years.
time jump every few years. I think, given that, I think the target for this was like 3 seasons, like something like that. So
That's
I think-
actually, I also didn't know that. For some whatever reason, I thought this was like a limited series or something. I
No,
thought
this is going for multiple seasons.
Oh, okay.
They've already
Okay.
made that clear.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I remember seeing something in early press saying like, we're going to try and get this, we're going to put the story into 3 seasons, but I could be mistaken.
I think they're probably going to let it go as long as it can, depending on how how fans react to it. First reactions are great for the most part. There are people like me who still think Matt Smith ruins the entire thing. But overall, I enjoyed what I got to see from most of these characters, and have no issue being someone who only knows Game of Thrones television, continuing this journey for as long as possible.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the main questions I have is, do you not like Matt Smith because he has your name? You're both named Matt, or is it because in Morbius he just danced so well that you couldn't see him possibly topping that achievement in any other?
It's pure
feature.
jealousy.
I haven't
That-
liked Matt Smith since I was in high school, so we're going on over a decade now. I just think he's one of the most overrated actors. He's sucked in basically everything he's been in outside of Last Night in Soho. Give me one good performance, because he fucking ruined Doctor Who for me. So outside of Last Night in Soho, give me one good performance, because it wasn't Terminator Jenny Smith. It's not fucking
Jenny Smith?
that's what Mark Ellis calls it, Jenny Smith.
Oh.
It's oh god, thank God he got cut from fucking episode 9. Oh, thank God. Just nothing, absolutely nothing I've enjoyed him in. I'm sorry, Pat. Why you got to keep poking this bear?
I'm
You
not. I
didn't
swear,
like
that's gonna
Damon
be
though. You didn't
You
like
said-
Damon?
No, he pulled me out of it. He's got the most punchable face in Hollywood.
I think
I
that
think you
goes
pulled
with-
yourself out of it.
No,
I think. Shouldn't you want to punch Damon in the face though?
no, because all I see, people say Ryan Reynolds and The Rock play the same character every time. All I see with Matt Smith is him playing himself the entire time. I don't see acting. I just see a guy spitting out words. He's a horrible fucking actor.
All right. I think I got everything I need.
I'm just
on
going
Matt.
to now call my friend Matt Smith to make sure he's okay.
Matt Smith. I'm sorry. Matt Smith is actually a really big supporter of the MontyVerse. I'm sorry, Matt Smith. But yeah. So, like I said, I think this was a good start to the show. I like hearing you guys talk about how, because honestly, I didn't see any of the trailers. I tried to go in this as fresh as possible because I wanted to divorce this as much from Game of Thrones as possible, because it's been so long from Game of Thrones, and I didn't mind the ending. I wasn't a huge fan of it, but I wasn't, like burn everything down, this is the worst thing ever type of person. So I kind of wanted to come in this as fresh as possible. So now hearing that there are going to be time skips, and this is going to cover a huge span of time in this section of Westeros is really exciting. And is there any other details or kind of things that we missed that maybe you wanted to touch upon and get our thoughts on, like any sort of important things that we may not have addressed or talked about?
Did you talk about how bad those fucking dragons look?
I did.
I didn't want to get into it too much because I still thought it was better than the CG in Star Wars and MCU TV shows. And I've dunked on those shows enough.
I would disagree vehemently.
You
sorry.
thought the dragons look worse than She-Hulk?
Yes.
Okay. we have no common ground here to discuss this. Then
I'm sorry, but they're a total step down from the dragons we got used to for.
Hold on, I'm glad that we're
8
talking about the
fucking
dragons though, because the one thing that I was wondering, they mentioned that there's 10 adult dragons.
Yes.
Yes.
We only see 2 of them.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So do we know like where the other 8 are? Who controls them? Is that
So
something that's established?
it's not like technically established in the show, but as a result of at this point in the book canon, Viserys doesn't have a dragon. He was the last rider of Balerion the Black Dread, the giant skull that we
Yep.
see at the end.
Mhm.
Yeah.
He didn't take another dragon afterwards. The other dragons are currently in the Dragon Pit, which was built specifically in King's Landing, or they're on Dragonstone. Most of them at this point, I believe, don't have riders. I want to say Rhaenys has one as well, so I think 7 of the 10 are without riders. They're also constantly laying eggs. The eggs are still being laid, so there are still young dragons that exist as well at this point. Other than that, I don't remember anything else off the top of my head with respect to where we are in terms of the actual dragons themselves.
Yeah, there's
Got it.
some old ones still kicking because there's a lot of dragons because they lived for a long time. Balerion
Yeah.
lived like 200 years or whatever it
Yeah.
was. So there's a lot of older dragons that are just kind of chilling that eventually will take up riders. So Rhaenyra is Melis,
Yeah.
the Red Queen.
Will dragons
Dragon.
factor in? I'm assuming because this is a conflict between Targaryens,
Right.
dragons are going to factor in heavily at points.
Yes.
Correct. Okay. See, that's exciting. See, that excites me.
And I pointed this out earlier, Matt. I think one of the things is we're going to be seeing so many more dragons that like the budget for it to continue to have them be like as like spectacular as they were in Game of Thrones, especially given the amount we're going to see and like potentially going forward what they're going to be doing.
But
I
isn't
think
that
they will-
why in Hollywood you reuse models and just change coloring?
Yes. I'm not a technical expert. I will defer to you on that. You are probably right. But I think that's the way I've seen it, like been thinking about it going into the show at the very least.
Here's my thing, I guess. Like I said, it's well known in the history of Hollywood. Look at She-Hulk, for example. They have already stated that this Professor Hulk that we see in the first episode is the exact same model they used in Endgame. We're talking about something that filmed a few years later, and they're using the exact same model. You can't tell me you couldn't just change up the coloring a little bit and sure, yeah, we're gonna get more dragons, but that also doesn't explain why that first CGI hall we see when the show opens up look like shit either. Like the
To be
CGI.
fair, it's the hall is like a burnt out Heron hall that is supposed to look like shit.
But you can do that. I'm a very big guy on finding the balance between physical and CG. That's something you could have built out a better looking set instead of what clearly was. You have the main area and the rest was CG, and I'm just like, that just looks bad. A lot of my complaints with this are all cosmetic outside of Matt Smith. Outside, I'll say this. I love how cinematography wise it looks nearly identical to Game of Thrones. It's not like what fucking Lord of the Rings is doing for Amazon, which I think that looks like shit, and that's another whole can of worms I'm not getting into right now. But when have we went, especially in something like this, when have we ever known HBO to say, no, we're not going to throw the money at that. We'll just take it. Just do whatever you got to do because we know this is going to blow up and be our next big thing. When have they never done that? And it just feels like that they didn't have the same carte blanche that Benioff and Weiss did with the original show.
To play devil's advocate, do you think that because of the critical and the fan backlash to the final season of Game of Thrones, they were a little tepid to essentially give them a giant sack of money in terms of a Game of Thrones spinoff and say like, oh, here's the budget, and they were kind of just because they were doing like 3 of these at the same time, weren't they? 3 different spinoffs, and they kind of just picked the one that worked the best.
They did 2.
Okay.
They filmed a pilot for one, and the pilot for that one was filmed way before the pilot for this.
Okay.
This was announced while the pilot for the first one was being filmed, and then it got scrapped.
Maybe that's why. Maybe that's why they kind of held back a little bit.
Yeah, but at the same time, normally you end up going back and reshooting a pilot because a pilot essentially. The first pilot is because I'm sorry, I'm the guy who knows the ins and outs of Hollywood and all that. Essentially, what happens with the pilot, and this happened with the first Game of Thrones, you will shoot the pilot, you give it to the studio. They'll be like, we like this, but we want you to recast this person, reshoot this, change this, and then we go from there. That happened with the first Game of Thrones. If I remember correctly, that's how Kit Harington got cast.
Yeah.
So it's not like it's uncommon for them to go back and do this stuff. But at the end of the day, it's a pilot, and I'll try to give it a little leeway. I guess tomorrow when I binge watch 5 episodes, maybe my tune will change. But on the I guess to me, you brought up do you think that gave HBO some hesitation? Normally that gives you the exact opposite because you want to make sure this one goes over so well. Look at Star Wars. They came up with so we all know people outside of me don't like Rise of Skywalker.
I like it.
I like Babu Frick.
It's like the most Star Wars movie. It's awesome.
Exactly.
I think Babu Frick is great.
But at the end of the day, they started doing this smaller, but they developed the volume technology. They've done all this other stuff to make something that looks the same scale on a much smaller budget.
Tony Gilroy would never use the volume. Okay.
I know.
No.
But you get my point. It's you figure out ways to still make it look good.
Yeah.
This just felt like, hey, we threw a CGI dragon on the screen and didn't care how they look like, if they blended well in the background or not. Just threw it in there.
So it's curious to see. It's curious to see if the reception, because again, critics seem to enjoy it. It's not getting as stellar numbers as Game of Thrones, but they're still good. They're still high 80s for this series so far. So I wonder if fans like it and critics continue to enjoy it. I wonder if we'll see a huge jump in the production quality of this series, especially in terms of the computer generated imagery.
I mean, I have faith in Sapochnik, even if maybe every element of the technical aspects aren't quite up to the same level as Game of Thrones. I think the story is going to carry it, and yes. I think they have the right people in there to be able to, even like if the bigger episode, when the bigger episodes come, I think they're going to hit the mark because they have the people that made those episodes great, even when the overarching story wasn't great in Game of Thrones, behind the scenes.
Yeah.
No, I agree. That's what I'm looking forward to watching ahead, and I'm still gonna, despite the Matt Smith of it all, still gonna give this show a chance. And I mean, I'll say this: I'm excited for Olivia Cooke. Olivia Cooke is one of my favorite young actresses working right now. If I was casting a Fantastic Four movie, she'd personally be my choice for Sue Storm.
That's a different show.
Yeah, save it for the fan casting for
the number one fan casting Fantastic Four podcast on the internet.
We don't want to cross streams over here.
But overall, the rest of the cast is what is the driving force, and I'm very interested to see what this new team does, because you look at this for this. I'm actually gonna have to compare this and Rings of Power. These two are still following a format that Benioff and Weiss set. They are respecting what came before it, but still doing their own thing within the parameters that are set. They are not pulling an Amazon who is like, yeah, technically this is a part of the New Line canon of Lord of the Rings and Hobbit films, but we're doing our own thing and don't care if this looks different and doesn't have the same feel. And that's rubbed me personally, and I know a few other fans have rubbed them the wrong way. Granted, am I going to tomorrow try to get tickets to see the first 2 episodes for free at Cinemark on the 31st? Yes. But that's because it's free and I can see a spectacle like that on the big screen. Well, I hate it. Who knows? But at the end, but back to the comparison, I respect what they're doing here. I don't respect what Amazon has decided to do with that, because that show walks so they can run. Those movies walk so that show can run. Give them the respect, but also still try to make it blend in, and that's what they're doing here. So I'm loving that.
Yeah, it definitely it felt like slipping back into the original Game of Thrones world. So that's something that really helped me get into this show, because it kind of felt like revisiting that series, but in a different lens. So I'm glad that you brought up the technical points on that. But guys, are there anything like any Easter eggs or anything that we didn't touch on that you guys wanted to bring up or talk about beyond, the stuff that we had already mentioned? I think this was a pretty simplistic episode in terms of stuff like that, but I don't know. You guys are the experts.
I think there is one thing going forward. I mentioned this briefly before we started. The very final scene with Viserys speaking to Rhaenyra and talking to her about the quote unquote the Song of Ice and Fire, right? Continuing the mythos from the Game of Thrones show about the whole bringing together of ice and fire that would, from what I understand and what I'm interpreting from it, is an allusion to what will happen in Game of Thrones, and to be like, yes, this is very clearly linked. But there might also be an illusion of what's to come here, and them thinking that it's what eventually happens in Game of Thrones in terms of significance. That's not included. That's never brought up in the book. Again, because it's a private conversation between Viserys and Rhaenyra, it's not something that any sort of secondary source would be able to write down in history. So the way that Fire and Blood is written, that's something that's never going to be added. And so it's an added element. And these are the sorts of things that I'm really excited to see going forward, how they fill out the show with stuff that isn't even written in the book or even alluded to.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned that, because you can't put that line of dialogue into the show without it having some impact beyond look, Game of Thrones, we're talking about it here. It has to play a role in this show. Otherwise it feels just sort of shoehorned and bad, honestly. So time will tell.
Time will tell indeed. All right, guys, final thoughts on House of the Dragon. Anything, and just give me anything else you left out that you may want to bring up. Patrick, let's start with you.
I can't wait for the rest of this. There are so many things that I can't talk about right now that I really, really want to see. And if they are done right, I truly believe they will be better than anything that was in Game of Thrones.
All right.
Similar to Patrick, there are things I want to mention and say that I shouldn't, because it's to be respectful. But also what I did was when Damon, who name dropped when he was drunk at his party, name dropped, hey, to the new heir for the Iron Throne, and there was like, oh dude, bro, come on, bro, come on. And it's like,
that
dude,
was savage.
You gotta fucking go, bro. Literally, you gotta go. You gotta go. But
dude, come on.
I liked.
Oh,
but yeah,
God.
can't wait to see some cool stuff happen, because I'm very excited.
Yeah, I do want to just quickly say, totally unrelated to anything, but I thought it was a weird coincidence. Earlier, Matt was talking about people getting recast in pilots, and Sean Wingblade just made a Full House reference. Bob Saget recast into the Full House pilot.
Yes.
He was not in the original pilot. So Just some
R.I.P.
interesting trivia there for you guys.
R.I.P. Bob Saget.
Anyway, about the show, though, I thought it was great. I thought it was good setup for kind of what's to come. It did a good job of setting up, creating a foundation from where a story can blossom. And I'm excited to see where it goes.
All right, Matt. Besides probably like 5 to 7% more Matt Smith, what are your thoughts so far on House of the Dragon?
I hate you so much right now.
Not as much as he hates Matt Smith.
Not as much as
Very
you hate
true.
Matt Smith.
Very true. It's solid. I unlike you guys don't have to wait the next week, so I'm feeling good about that.
That's super cool.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks.
Oh, did you drop
Hey.
something? Did you even pick it up for you?
I just did that because Pat's pissing me off. Anyways, very solid pilot. There's a lot to work with. I'm excited to see what happens after the time jump because while these two younger actresses were good, I am very curious to see how Olivia Cooke and Emma Darcy pick it up from here and how their performances translate. Does it feel like a natural transition between the two that we got here to where they are now? That's always the biggest concern I have with time jumps. So.
Yeah, I mean, and one of our viewers brought up a very good question. If I had to rate this, I'd probably say it was over 9 more billions. I mean, it was Morbid time. It was Morbid time, and I loved it. I thought, like Matt said, it was a great pilot. It was a solid start to a series, especially a series that follows something so as iconic as Game of Thrones. I think that it left us with a lot of questions. It set up a lot of great storylines. It set up a lot of things that could potentially happen. It's making us question allegiances. It's making us question character morals. So I really like what it set up so far, and I'm super excited to see what comes next. But unless there's anything else anyone can think of, I think that's going to do it for this breakdown of episode 1 of House of the Dragons. Everyone go around and tell the people where they can find you. Let's start with Patrick. Where can the people find you?
Don't find me. I just don't. It's not a good idea.
All right, John, where can the people find you?
Hey, let me tell you something, folks. If you like Fast and Furious references, video game references, and
Follow that,
wrestling
man.
references, go on Twitter at JON_LASTRINA. I'm your guy.
Best follow of my life.
Zach, where can the people find you?
You can also, if you like cars and movies about cars, you can find me and John Lestrina on every episode of The Family Show, a series that aired a little over a year ago. Matt was also on that a handful of times.
The majority of it. I think
Okay, yeah, he was on it a decent amount.
I think from like Fast 3 on, I was on.
Yeah, so go check that out,
Okay.
especially the
Alright.
Too Fast, Too Furious episode.
It's a great episode.
But other than that, you can find me on Twitter at Hi, my name is Zach M. #McGriddle Challenge.
Hashtag McGriddle
Hashtag
Challenge.
McGriddle
Matt,
Challenge.
where can the people find you besides going to the gym with Matt Smith and going to dinner and the movies?
I'm gonna kill you. You can find me over on What Real Entertainment. When I'm not over there, I'm normally over here because even though he's running away with this Matt Smith shit right now, Pat's a good friend of mine, and I always enjoy doing crossover content with him. So, and then
you
on
guys-
Twitter right here.
and right there. And you guys can find me here on the MontyVerse at the MontyVerse everywhere on the socials. If you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell because we've got content coming out all the time. And you know what, guys? I think that's going to do it for us. So until next time, guys, stay versed.
See ya, squirts.